The Galactic Empire stood as an unshakable monolith, its vast fleets casting shadows over countless star systems. For centuries, it had expanded its dominion through sheer force, its leaders believing their might to be unassailable. The Empire's military, a sprawling machine of discipline and destruction, was revered and feared across the galaxy. Its commanders, almost exclusively male and drawn from the Empire's founding species, viewed themselves as the architects of an eternal order. They saw weakness as a sin, mercy as a flaw, and dissent as a disease to be eradicated. Among the myriad species they subjugated, humans were considered little more than an afterthought, a scattered, disorganized race with no unified government, no formidable fleet, and no will to fight. The Empire's leaders scoffed at the idea that humanity could ever pose a threat. They were wrong. General Alara Voss stood at the viewport of her command ship, her sharp green eyes scanning the swirling nebula outside. The light from a distant star caught the silver insignia on her uniform, a rare honor for a human in the Empire's ranks. Her rise had been nothing short of extraordinary. Born on a backwater colony, Alara had joined the Imperial military as a low-ranking officer, a position typically reserved for humans who sought to prove their loyalty. But Alara was not like the others. She had a mind for strategy that bordered on genius, a relentless drive, and a quiet charisma that inspired those around her. Over the years, she had climbed the ranks, earning the grudging respect of her superiors and the unwavering loyalty of her subordinates. Yet, despite her achievements, she was never fully accepted. The Empire's elite viewed her as an anomaly, a human who had somehow slipped through the cracks of their rigid hierarchy. Alara's journey had been fraught with challenges. She had faced discrimination at every turn, her every move scrutinized, her every success downplayed. But she had endured, using their underestimation to her advantage. Behind the Empire's back, she had forged alliances with human colonies and rebel factions, quietly building a network of resistance. She had studied the Empire's tactics, its weaknesses, its blind spots, and she had waited, biding her time for the right moment to strike. That moment was now. The catalyst came in the form of a diplomatic insult. The Empire, emboldened by its recent conquests, had demanded the unconditional surrender of a human colony on the edge of their territory. The colony, known as New Terra, was a thriving hub of innovation and culture, a symbol of humanity's resilience. The Empire's ultimatum was clear: submit or be annihilated. Alara, as the highest-ranking human in the Imperial military, was summoned to the negotiation table. The meeting took place aboard the Eclipse, the flagship of the Empire's fleet. The room was opulent, designed to intimidate, with towering columns and a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. The Empire's representatives, clad in their pristine uniforms, regarded Alara with thinly veiled disdain. The negotiations were a farce. The Empire had no intention of listening to the colony's pleas. Their terms were non-negotiable, their tone condescending. Alara listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When it was her turn to speak, she rose from her seat, her presence commanding the room. "You demand our surrender," she began, her voice calm but laced with steel. "You believe we are weak, that we will bow to your might without a fight. You are mistaken." The room fell silent, the Empire's representatives exchanging incredulous glances. Alara continued, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "You want war? We will give you war." The declaration hung in the air, a challenge that reverberated through the room. The Empire's representatives laughed, their arrogance blinding them to the gravity of her words. They dismissed her as a fool, a human who had overstepped her bounds. But Alara knew better. She had seen the cracks in the Empire's facade, the rot beneath its gleaming surface. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and she would not let it slip away. As she left the Eclipse, Alara's mind was already racing with plans. She returned to her command ship, where her most trusted officers awaited. Among them was Captain Yarrick, a grizzled veteran who had served with her for years. "They didn't listen, did they?" he asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. Alara shook her head. "No, they didn't. But that's their mistake. She activated the holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy. It's time to show them what humanity is capable of. Over the next few days, Alara worked tirelessly, coordinating with her allies across the galaxy. She reached out to human colonies, rebel factions, and even disgruntled members of the Empire's military. Her message was clear. The time for resistance was now. The response was overwhelming. Ships, supplies, and soldiers began to converge on New Terra, their determination fueled by years of oppression. Alara's plan was audacious, a gamble that hinged on the Empire's overconfidence. But she knew it was their only chance. The Empire, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. They dismissed Alara's threat as empty bravado, their arrogance clouding their judgment. They continued their preparations for the invasion of New Terra, confident in their superiority. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Rumors of Alara's defiance spread through the ranks, sowing doubt among the soldiers. Some began to question the Empire's endless wars, its disregard for life. Others whispered of a human general who dared to stand against them. As the Empire's fleet approached New Terra, Alara stood on the bridge of her command ship, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The moment of reckoning was near. She thought of the countless lives that had been lost to the Empire's tyranny, of the worlds that had been crushed beneath its boot. She thought of her own journey, the sacrifices she had made, the battles she had fought, and she knew that this was her destiny. The first shots were fired as the Empire's fleet entered the system. Alara's forces, though outnumbered, were prepared. They struck with precision, targeting the Empire's supply lines and communication networks. The Empire, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. But Alara had anticipated their every move. Her tactics were unconventional, her strategies brilliant. She exploited their weaknesses, turning their strength against them. The battle raged for hours, the skies lit by the flashes of laser fire and the explosions of ships. As the dust settled, it became clear that the Empire had suffered a devastating blow. Their fleet, once thought invincible, was in disarray. Alara's forces had emerged victorious, their morale soaring. But Alara knew that this was only the beginning. The Empire would not take this defeat lightly. They would As she stood on the bridge, her officers gathered around her, their faces filled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We've struck the first blow," Alara said, her voice steady. "But this is far from over. The Empire will come for us, and we must be prepared. This is not just a fight for New Terra. This is a—" Her words resonated through the ship, a rallying cry for the battles to come. The crew, inspired by her leadership, stood a little taller, their resolve hardened. Alara turned back to the viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars. The war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Empire's response to the defeat at New Terra was swift and brutal. News of the humiliating loss spread like wildfire through their ranks, igniting a fury that burned hotter than the cores of their warships. Admiral Krell, a seasoned commander known for his ruthlessness, was tasked with crushing the human rebellion before it could gain momentum. He viewed Alara's victory as a fluke, a lucky strike by a desperate foe. "Humans are insects," he declared to his officers aboard the Iron Fist, his flagship. "They may sting, but they cannot withstand the boot." His confidence was unshaken, his strategy straightforward. Overwhelm the humans with sheer force and leave no room for their tricks. Meanwhile, Alara's forces regrouped on New Terra, their spirits buoyed by their recent triumph but tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. The colony had become a fortress, its defenses bolstered by scavenged Imperial technology and the ingenuity of human engineers. Alara moved among her troops, her presence a steadying force. She knew the Empire would come, and she knew they would come in numbers. But she also knew their arrogance would blind them to the true strength of her forces. "They think we're weak," she told Captain Yarrick as they reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "They think we'll break under pressure. Let them think that. We'll use their arrogance against them." The Empire's fleet arrived in the New Terra system like a storm, their ships blotting out the stars. Admiral Krell's voice boomed across the comms. demanding the colony's immediate surrender. "You have 1 hour to lay down your arms," he warned. "Resist, and we will reduce your world to ash." Alara's response was silence. She had no intention of negotiating. Instead, she activated a series of hidden defenses, deploying drones and mines to disrupt the Empire's advance. The first wave of Imperial ships fell into the trap, their hulls torn apart by explosions. Krell cursed, his voice crackling with rage. "Destroy them," he roared. "Leave nothing standing." The battle that followed was a maelstrom of fire and fury. The Empire's ships unleashed a relentless barrage, their weapons lighting up the void. Alara's forces, though outgunned, fought with a ferocity that stunned their enemies. They used the terrain to their advantage, luring Imperial ships into asteroid fields and ambushing them with hit-and-run tactics. Alara herself was everywhere, her command ship darting through the chaos, her orders precise and unyielding. She was a shadow, a phantom, always one step ahead of her foes. Krell, for all his bluster, found himself outmaneuvered at every turn. "How is she doing this?" he muttered, his frustration mounting. "She's just a human." But Alara was more than just a human. She was a strategist, a leader, and a symbol. Her defiance had ignited a spark across the galaxy, and that spark was growing into a flame. Word of her victories spread, reaching the farthest corners of Imperial space. On distant colonies, in hidden outposts, and even aboard Imperial ships, whispers of rebellion began to stir. Some saw her as a hero, others as a harbinger of change. And some, like Lieutenant Vera, a young officer aboard the Iron Fist, began to question their loyalty to the Empire. Vera had joined the military to bring order to the galaxy, but what she had seen was not order, it was oppression. As she watched the battle unfold, a seed of doubt took root in her mind. The turning point came when Alara launched a daring raid on the Empire's supply lines. Using a small, fast-moving fleet, she struck at a convoy carrying critical resources. The attack was swift and devastating, leaving the convoy in ruins. Krell, already reeling from the losses in the main battle, was furious. "How did they know?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the console. "Who betrayed us?" His paranoia grew, and he began to suspect his own officers. The atmosphere aboard the Iron Fist grew tense, trust eroding under the weight of his accusations. Alara, meanwhile, seized the opportunity to press her advantage. She reached out to disaffected members of the Imperial military, offering them a chance to join her cause. Her message was simple. The Empire does not value loyalty. It values obedience. Stand with us and fight for something greater. Her words resonated with those who had grown disillusioned, and slowly her ranks began to swell. Among them was Lieutenant Vera, who defected with a small group of soldiers, bringing valuable intelligence and resources. As the battle for New Terra raged on, the tide began to turn. The Empire's forces, once unstoppable, found themselves bogged down by Alara's relentless tactics. Their supply lines were stretched thin, their morale crumbling under the weight of constant setbacks. Krell, desperate to regain the upper hand, ordered a full-scale assault on the colony. "Crush them," he commanded. "Leave no stone unturned." The assault was brutal, the skies above New Terra filled with the roar of engines and the flash of explosions. Alara's forces fought valiantly, but the sheer numbers of the Imperial fleet began to take their toll. Just as it seemed the colony might fall, Alara unveiled her final gambit. Using a network of hidden satellites, she activated a powerful EMP pulse that disabled the Imperial ship systems. The Iron Fist and its fleet were left adrift, vulnerable and exposed. Alara's forces moved in, capturing key ships and forcing the rest to retreat. The victory was hard-won, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the remnants of the Imperial fleet fled, Alara stood on the bridge of her command ship, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She knew the war was far from over, but she also knew that the Empire's invincibility had been shattered. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice steady. "The galaxy is watching, and we will not stop until we are free." Her words echoed through the ship, a promise and a warning. The crew, battered but unbroken, stood a little taller. Their resolve hardened. The Empire would come again, of that there was no doubt. But so too would Alara. And when they did, the galaxy would tremble. The fall of the Galactic Empire began not with a single battle, but with a series of cascading defeats that chipped away at its foundation like a relentless tide. Admiral Krell's retreat from New Terra was a humiliation he could not stomach, and his rage festered as he regrouped his battered fleet. He vowed to crush General Alara and her rebellion, no matter the cost. But the Empire, once a monolith of invincibility, was beginning to show cracks. News of Alara's victories spread like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of the oppressed and sowing doubt among the Empire's ranks. The galaxy watched, holding its breath, as the balance of power began to shift. Alara, meanwhile, was already planning her next move. She knew the Empire would not rest until she was destroyed, and she intended to strike before they could recover. Her forces had grown stronger, bolstered by defectors and allies who had once lived in fear of the Empire's wrath. Among them was Lieutenant Vera, whose knowledge of Imperial tactics proved invaluable. Alara welcomed her with a firm handshake and a nod of respect. "You took a great risk," she said. "But you're not alone anymore." Vera's eyes gleamed with determination. "I've seen what the Empire does to those who defy them," she replied. "I'd rather die fighting for something than live serving nothing." The rebellion's next target was the Imperial shipyards at Kesari Prime, a sprawling complex that produced the Empire's most advanced warships. Destroying it would cripple their ability to replenish their fleet and buy Alara's forces precious time. But the shipyards were heavily fortified, protected by a network of orbital defenses and a garrison of elite troops. "It's a suicide mission," Captain Yarrick muttered as they reviewed the plans. "Even if we succeed, we'll lose half our fleet." Alara's gaze was steely. "We don't have a choice," she said. "If we don't act now, the Empire will crush us. This is our chance to turn the tide." The attack on Kesari Prime was a masterpiece of strategy and audacity. Alara divided her forces into 3 groups. One to draw the defenses away, another to disable the orbital platforms, and a third to strike at the heart of the shipyards. The plan relied on precision, timing, and a willingness to sacrifice. As the battle began, chaos erupted. The Empire's forces, confident in their defenses, were caught off guard by the rebels' ferocity. Alara's command ship led the charge, weaving through a hail of laser fire to deliver a crippling blow to the shipyard's power core. The explosion lit up the sky, a blinding flash that signaled the beginning of the end for the Empire's dominance. But the victory came at a cost. Many of Alara's ships were lost, their crews sacrificing themselves to ensure the mission's success. Among the fallen was Captain Yarrick, whose ship had taken the brunt of the Empire's counterattack. Alara stood on the bridge of her command ship, her heart heavy as she received the news. "He was a good man," she said quietly, "and he died a hero." Her grief was tempered by the knowledge that his sacrifice had not been in vain. The shipyards were in ruins, and the Empire's ability to wage war had been severely diminished. The fall of Kesari Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Systems that had once cowered under the Empire's shadow began to rise up, inspired by Alara's defiance. Rebel cells sprang up on dozens of worlds, their actions coordinated by a network of communications that Alara had painstakingly built. The Empire, once a unified force, began to fracture under the strain. Admiral Krell, desperate to maintain control, resorted to increasingly brutal measures. He ordered the bombardment of rebellious colonies, hoping to crush the uprising through fear. But his actions only fueled the flames of resistance. Even within the Empire's ranks, dissent grew. Soldiers who had once believed in their cause began to question their loyalty, their faith in the Empire eroded by its cruelty. The final battle came not on a distant world, but at the heart of the Empire itself. Alara's forces, now a formidable army, launched an assault on the imperial capital. The city was a fortress, its towering spires and sprawling defenses a testament to the Empire's might. But Alara had a plan. Using intelligence gathered by defectors and rebel spies, she identified a weakness in the city's defenses. a hidden network of tunnels that led directly to the imperial palace. "This is it," she told her troops as they prepared for the assault. "This is where we end it. For Yarrick. For all of us." The battle was fierce. The streets of the capital turned into a war zone. Alara's forces fought with a desperation born of years of oppression, their determination unshakable. The Empire's troops, though well-trained, were demoralized and outmatched. As Alara's forces pushed deeper into the city, they encountered little resistance. The people of the capital, long silenced by fear, began to rise up, joining the rebels in their fight. The Empire's grip on power was slipping, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Alara's final confrontation was with Admiral Krell himself. The two met in the throne room of the Imperial Palace, a cavernous hall filled with the echoes of their footsteps. Krell, his uniform torn and his face etched with fury, drew his weapon. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You're nothing but a traitor, a stain on the galaxy." Alara's expression was calm, her voice steady. "I'm not the one who betrayed the galaxy," she replied. "You did that when you decided to rule through fear and oppression." The fight was brief but brutal, a clash of wills as much as weapons. In the end, it was Alara who stood victorious, Krell's lifeless body at her feet. With the fall of the capital, the Empire crumbled. Its leaders were captured, its fleets disbanded, and its oppressive regime dismantled. Alara stood before the gathered crowds, her presence a beacon of hope. "This is not the end," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "This is the beginning. A new era, where we build a galaxy that values freedom, justice, and equality. But it will not be easy. The road ahead is long, and there will be challenges. But if we stand together, we can overcome anything." As the cheers of the crowd echoed around her, Alara allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought of all those who had fought and died for this moment, of the sacrifices that had been made. She thought of Yarrick, of Vera, of the countless others who had stood by her side. And she knew that their fight had not been in vain. The galaxy was free, and it was up to them to shape its future. But even as she celebrated, Alara knew that the work was far from over. The Empire's fall had left a power vacuum, and there were those who would seek to exploit it. New threats would arise, and new battles would be fought. But for now, she allowed herself to hope. The galaxy was no longer under the shadow of tyranny, and that was a victory worth fighting for. As she looked out at the sea of faces before her, she felt a surge of determination. The war was over, but the journey was just beginning, and she would be ready,